Well, I am so glad that y'all are here. And I just want to make sure that you guys really do understand that for nothing else, you already have the power. And today we're just going to talk to you a little bit about stop giving it away. Um, with that, just a real quick introduction. My name is Kate Woodward Young. I am one of the co hosts for Childcare Conversations. We are a podcast geared entirely at directors and administrators. Doesn't mean that owners don't get something from it, doesn't mean that teachers don't get something from it, but our target market is 100% the director. And I've seen some familiar faces already logged on to the participant group. Thank you so much for coming to join, friends and fans. And there's also some other great podcast folks in the participant list. And so I'm glad to see y'all here. My co-host is Carrie Casey, who also happens to be my cousin. We often do this presentation together, but she is enjoying our family at a family reunion she went to. I did not. I chose to stay back, but that was fine because it was what was right for me, and that is the most important part of even today's conversation. In addition to being co-hosts of a podcast, we are also authors and have written 8 books that are specifically industry specific. So we are glad to be a resource and look forward to getting to know some of you who we may not already know well a little bit better today. So the first thing is just remembering that you are not alone. You are not invisible. You are not powerless, that, you really are important to everything about your program. And we know that. We know what it's like to carry literally the weight of what might feel like the world, but at least your program, right? So whether it is having to show up at 6 a.m. because somebody called in sick and you have 3 people on vacation this week, we understand just general licensing stress. And well, this workshop isn't necessarily here just to motivate you. What we hope to do is give you some tools that you'll be able to walk away. And I keep saying we, but really it's just me today, right? So hopefully you'll be able to walk away with a couple of tools and maybe at least one aha moment. I know you're sad, but Carrie will be around. We have podcasts twice a week, so you can always go listen to Carrie. We also are going to be doing workshops live and in person in Grapevine this week at the Frog Street Conference and in Houston at the Born to Teach Conference. And if you don't already know, NCCA has their RFP out for their conference in March, and we plan to be there. So hopefully we'll get to see folks there. Now, one thing to remember is that as a leader, there is going to be a time, and it could have even been this morning, where there's going to be a little self-doubt. And guess what? That's kind of normal. And it's okay. And it doesn't necessarily define your leadership skill. So as you start to think through today, just remember that it doesn't matter if it's your to-do list, if it's parent communication, if it's regulatory compliance, all of those things are just part of really doing your job. However, I just want to share a quick story with you. I worked with a center director and her name was Sarah, and Sarah was great. And we loved Sarah, but Sarah wanted everybody to really like her. And so as a result, she didn't always enforce the policies. She didn't always enforce the policies with the parents, and she didn't always enforce the policies with her staff. However, once she stepped into her authority and set clear boundaries, her team started to respect her. And believe it or not, that chaos disappeared. She struggled with enforcing policy. She wanted everybody to love her, to like her, but all that did was create chaos. So confidence is not about perfection. It's about owning your decisions. So what are we going to talk a little bit about today? We're going to talk about enhancing your confidence. We're going to talk about establishing trust, promoting well-being, and empowering yourself to lead with your voice, not somebody else's voice. If you've been a director, and you can give me any sort of an emoji or a thumb or a hand, if you've been a director who has followed a previous director. So in other words, you aren't necessarily the founding director. If you're one of those, let me get um, a quick emoji down in the chat. I see a hand raised. I see some thumbs. Awesome. So this is an example of how you might have tried to come in with somebody else's voice, and so you haven't even been able to find your own. And one of the things I just want to remind you is that confidence comes from competence. But you know what? Action and belief. And it's the more you do, the more confident you get. For example, some of us only think about practicing, and I'm going to use that term, or interviewing when we actually need to hire somebody. And so as a result, sometimes we may not have interviewed or hired somebody for months or even years because we've finally got that staffing piece figured out. We're working together as a team. And then just, I don't know, something might happen. You might have a major employer change. You might have some people move. I don't know, 5 years ago, we had a little staff tussle with something called COVID, right? And so with that, all of a sudden we found ourselves having to interview, and we had to hire, and then we had to onboard, and we had to bring on staff, and we hadn't done it in a while. So one of the things that I really like to tell new directors, even old directors, if they're telling me that they're struggling with that team building, that staff morale piece, always be hiring, for no other reason than then you get better at it, and then you get to keep the ones you really, really like versus the ones you have. I'd love to think that we've all got the creme de la creme, the staff that we love, the staff that we want, but I'm pretty sure we all have some of those staff that we're like, really? They're here again. Why aren't they the one that call in sick? And we know that they're the ones that bring us the anxiety because we have no idea what's going to happen that day. Where if you're always hiring and you're always onboarding, you can let those other folks go. Now, we could do a whole workshop and where do you find those people and how do you find those people? That's not this workshop. This workshop is really just about confidence and taking that next step. And so practicing is the biggest part of confidence. And so whether that practice is setting that boundary or practicing those interviews by actually always be hiring, those are pieces that are going to start to build that confidence. But self-doubt is fear taking place of the truth. And you are valuable. You are one of a kind. You are loved, whether it's by yourself, whether it's by your staff. And if you're not sure, walk into a toddler room and see how quick those hugs and those feelings come. You have the greatest job in the world. Where else can you walk into a room and get unconditional love by at least 10 people, right? And so these folks will hug you, they will give you, they will make sure that you know that you are in the right place. Now, if you're not really sure, today when you get off this webinar, write yourself some notes on why you're here. Because if you're not here because you want to make a difference and you're not really sure why you're here, you might need some time because you're going to struggle with this fear is a liar if you're not 100% sure you know why you're here to begin with. All right. We've all had this. I know I'm not the only person who's had imposter syndrome, right? And we're just not really sure if we're the right leader for the group we have. And sometimes that is exactly what's creating that chaos. That is why we are letting people do whatever they want to do. We're not enforcing policies. We might have some SOPs or some standard operating procedures, but maybe we don't always follow them because, again, we want people to like us. And part of that is that fight with that imposter syndrome. So one of the directors that took our course, her name was Lisa. And it took her longer to find herself as the leader than it took her staff. And once others started to believe, she was like, oh, wait, they actually see me as the boss. And so she had to quickly get in the right mindset. And I know that mindset's another one of those words that some folks might see as like the latest buzzword, right? But there is something about your stinking thinking or what's going on in your head. And if you don't believe it, nobody else is going to believe it either. So, all right. So let's share. This is an opportunity for us to go grab the chat. And I'd love to see a lot of folks share in the chat, which is what is one thing you do well as a leader? So give me your chat. Give me your thoughts. What do you do well? Because if you don't write it, I might just start calling people out and have people share. All right. Dawn leads by example. I love it. Mop and plunge those toilets. Absolutely. Oh, so, Tim, fake it till you make it. Fatumi. I actually owned an office building called the Fatumi Office Building in the early 90s before, co-working was a thing. Love it. Facilitate collaboration, listen, support. Oh, these are great, great examples. So if you get a chance, go look in the chat, read what some of the other folks who are on are saying they do well, and then kind of identify, well, maybe I do that well too. Or maybe it's just the opposite. Maybe you're like, ooh, not sure I do that as well as maybe I should. And you know what? That's okay, because part of the reason for coming to webinars, going to conferences, part of the reason that we even have a podcast after, 5 years and 270 episodes is because we wanted to share and we want to connect with other directors, owners, and administrators and help them find each other. And so, whether you're in New England and you need to go find Erica in Rhode Island and she's in the chat, whether you are in Texas and you need to go find Tim's on here somewhere, Tim Kaminsky. There are folks all over the country on this webinar. And so if you don't have a peer that you can either see as a resource or if nothing else, vent on those days you don't feel like you've got it, go find them. Go send them a message and say, hey, I saw you on this webinar and I am fairly new into this role and I need somebody. Okay. Because trust only comes from consistency, communication, and competence. It is built daily. It is not an overnight thing. There are absolutely directors and owners and state leaders on this webinar who have been doing this for, and when I say decades, I mean decades. I started in the field 31 years ago. And before that, I was a certified business analyst. I worked for the SBA. Childcare was not in my to-do list, but I had a baby. And next thing I know, it's on my to-do list. And so, and I'm so glad that I did. And I have been able to bridge having a registered family home to being a director of a multi-site program to schools, to school age. I love school age care. Advocacy and really being that champion over the last 20 years for the director, for you. And so I want you to remember as a director that sometimes it isn't those grand gestures. We are not about the Hallmark Channel. Okay, so we are not making grand gestures. It is not about did you remember their birthday once a year? Did you celebrate their work anniversary? It's about those small moments and the small, consistent actions that are going to help you build that trust with your staff. It's also going to be, if you think about it, how your own family build that trust with you, right? How many of you have, maybe some not so short people? How many of you have children? If you've got children, give me a hand, a heart, a thumb, a something, because even if they're young children, this is still really, really important. If they're young adult children, um, that same kind of thing happens, right? It's can they trust you? Are you going to be there for the big and for the small? This is one of my favorites, right? We all have our phones out. Our staff have their phones out, right? Like, so everybody's got this technology. And I love and giggle at the same time when we hear things like social media. And we think about how many folks are so antisocial on their social media. They don't engage, they don't respond. You'll see people with thousands of followers, right? I've got a friend who's got like 31,000 followers, but if you look at her engagement and you look at the number of people that like or respond to a post, it's like two. And so instead of scrolling, stop and say hello and stop and say hi. And remember those simple things, sending the birthday text to a parent, sending a birthday text to a staff person who has a birthday on a Saturday. Make sure that folks know they can trust you. Make sure that folks know that you're there for them. One of my favorite learning lessons as a director is that it's not about how much I would tell people I appreciated them. It's when I told other people that I appreciated them in front of them. So try that on real quick for um as kind of a thought. When is the last time you told a parent how much you appreciated the teacher in their kid's classroom? Is this something that you do every day? Is this something that you do at least once a week? Is this something that you have encouraged your teachers, your lead teachers, to maybe do with their assistants? And even more, have you done it in front of other staff? And here's my favorite. Have you done it in front of the kids? Because if you have a teacher that the kids aren't really sure if they trust, but you're in there and you're engaged in the classroom and you tell the kids how much you really enjoy having Miss Erica as a teacher and what a great job she does for you, well, then the kids are going to be like, oh, so she does a great job. That's really cool. Right. And so they want to know that their teacher is a good teacher. They want to be part of that engagement with their teacher. So those small actions. What are some other small actions that some of you maybe do consistently or maybe wish you did consistently? I mean, I'm one of those people that I set timers and I make my to-dos in my calendar. So I remember to do these kinds of things, right? Like I have a note in my calendar once a week to send all of my kids, I have 4 young adult children, to send them some positive text messages. Because I'm really good at sending them the text messages of don't forget to do this or did you do that or whatever. I don't really remember to send them those positive ones. So, what are some things that you might be able to share with other folks that you think has worked really, really well, either with your personal staff, maybe with your children? Anybody got some thoughts that they want to share? Oh, come on. I know y'all are still out there. Uh, I know. Okay, come on, Erica, Amanda, Tim. I'm going to start calling you out. So this is what happens when I know you. Um, shout outs. Absolutely. Erica, what does that look like to you in your program? Are you doing shout outs on your communication app to parents? Is that shout outs at staff meetings? Where do those shout outs happen? I love shout outs. I know. Come on. Y'all got some secrets. Y'all are keeping the best. Come on, everywhere. Absolutely. Acknowledging staff and their personal accomplishments. Absolutely. When's the last time you sent something out on the parent communication app or a parent newsletter, depending on your your preferred method that tells people about the awesome training that your staff are going to or just went to. Right. So there's all kinds of conferences in the summer, right? Like, so some people have different seasons, right? Like some parts of the country have fall conference season, other people have summer conference season, and even, then there's the spring conference season. So have you told your parents that your staff get 30 hours or 20 hours or whatever it is in your state of continuing education every year? So this is my opportunity to really brag about Texas educators and Texas directors, just to give you an idea. So go find out what it is in your state. In Texas, one industry that most people would consider a profession requires more continuing education than early childcare. So if you are a physician's assistant or a physician's associate, same positions, kind of some slightly different terms, you're required to have 50 continuing education hours a year in the state of Texas. If you are a dentist, a lawyer, a physician, a nurse, a teacher, an accountant, there's probably some others, but those are the ones that pop into my head. You actually are required to have less than an early childhood educator in the state of Texas. So we have professionals, and a lot of times our staff don't view themselves that way. So it's our job as directors, owners, and administrators to tell and to share that with our parents and make sure our parents know that we have professionals who are required to have continuing education every single year, and how excited we are that they get to choose that, or that you bring people in. Maybe you bring experts in. Man, get those experts, and maybe have the experts, if you've got experts doing some staff training, ask if they'll stay and do a 2-hour workshop for your parents. You're already paying them to come in. Get them to stay an extra couple hours. So, all right. So think about what we've just talked about and how sometimes it's those little things. What I'd love for you to continue to share in the chat is, what is a small trust building habit that you can build today? Right? So some of us might have things that we do already, and I saw some great suggestions and examples of things that folks are already doing. And um and yes. Okay. So yes. So Tim shared an example. So for, what I'm going to consider maybe one of his careers or a previous career, he only has to have 10 hours. But in Texas, as a child care director, he's required to have 30. Okay. So what do you say you're going to do? Oh, follow through and follow up. That is huge. And that doesn't matter if that's a 2-year-old, if that is your staff person in the preschool classroom. It doesn't matter if it's a parent. Whoever you've told you're going to do something, man, follow through and follow up, and follow all the way through. So if they've asked for a resource or they've asked for information, not only give it to them, loop back around and see if that was what they actually needed. Okay. One of my favorite things really is being able to be of service to my parents and to my teachers. Sometimes it's also probably my biggest fault, because as a result, I'm constantly trying to do things for people that they didn't actually ask me to do. I just assumed that they needed me to do it. And so if I'm not careful, I end up with a lot of things on my to-do list, and I forget to check that if what I gave them was actually the right resource. Was it helpful? Um, for those of you watching the news across the country, we know that Texas and now New Mexico is having flooding. We have other parts of the country that have had fires, right? So we are constantly bombarded with natural disasters and emergencies. And sometimes that can cause you as a director to maybe be a little overwhelmed. It could mean that your parents are watching the news and find themselves overwhelmed. Maybe your staff are watching some of this and feeling a little overwhelmed. And so if they ask you for a resource, even if they don't act on it right away, don't make the assumption it was necessarily the wrong resource. It may just be for them that their time didn't actually become the right time for them to do what they thought they were going to do. How many of you have like had plans that you were going to do something in 2025 and you wake up and you realize half the year's over and I haven't even started, right? So it could be one of those things that if you know that somebody's having a bad day and so you want to do something nice, and Erica has an example, right, where maybe you send somebody a care package and you had the best intentions, but the care package got there either too early or too late, or maybe they weren't as sick as long as you thought maybe they would be. You know what? It's the thought that counts, right? And so um, sometimes that's the advantage of working together. So those of you who are directors, owners, and administrators who have a team, hallelujah, you have people who can implement your ideas. I am great at implementing ideas. When I have administrative assistants, it's so much easier for me to make sure that birthday cards get sent and that my dry cleaning gets picked up. If I have to do it myself, that dry cleaning can sit there for months, right? So remember that if you've given somebody a tool or a resource or you've thought about it, did you follow through? And everybody has their tool. Here's my tool, right? This is my tool. It's a post-it note, right? It's a stack of post-it notes. I have them with me everywhere, post-it notes and index cards. Okay. I am constantly writing notes. Whether you want to call it ADD, ADHD, menopause brain, I'm just getting old, whatever you want to call it. I'm always writing stuff down. I don't ever try to rely on, am I going to make sure I get it done because somebody asked me a question? And the best thing for me has been when I'm working with staff is literally give them the note card or the post-it note to have them write it down, because then it's not me trying to remember what they've asked me. It's them writing down what they actually need from me. And that puts some of the onus on them, right? It's them saying, hey, I need your help for this. So, woo, I know, I can sit here and talk straight for probably an hour. So I am going to, well, I'm going to probably do that for more than 1 hour. So let's be honest. We're looking at some cups here. And I know this is a phrase we've all heard of, right? Like you can't pour from an empty cup. You can't lead from an empty cup. And if you're anything like me, I spent probably over 30 years professionally thinking I knew exactly what self-care was. And there were times I thought I was being selfish. And there were times that I did things that I felt like I was obligated to do. And so it really wasn't self-care, right? So and I'm going to use fingernails as an example, right? If you're somebody who loves to get your fingernails done, or just your toes done, because nobody needs to see your toes, or you're just maybe you're a person who just likes to run away to the beach on a weekend and nobody needs to know where you are, you just completely disconnect. I envy you. But depending on where you live in the country, that might be the perfect version of self-care for you. Don't ever view that as being selfish. But also, if it's something you start to feel obligated to, like again, my toes, I can get my toes, they can look all pretty, nobody's going to see them. And if I don't want to get them done in 2 weeks, nobody's going to know. But that's not the same if I'm getting my nails done, right? So if I'm getting my nails done, I kind of have to do those every couple of weeks. And so that's no longer, it may no longer be self-care to you. It may now feel like an obligation that you have to remember to make an appointment, because if you don't, people are going to start to judge you because your nails have now all grown out. And so think about what self-care is to you. It could be entirely binging. That's the best. To me, it's the best thing that came out of COVID is basically permission to binge, right? So it's okay if you spend 8 hours watching the same show. I really wish Netflix and the different streaming services would stop going, hey, are you still there? I think there should be a pre-programmed button that says, I will be here for at least 8 hours. I'm binging. I don't work today. Right? Like, why has nobody come up with that option? That should just be a setting. I am sure that somebody can. They've just chosen not to. They just want to keep asking me so that I have to figure out what button I'm supposed to press. So, find your version of self-care. 8 hours of Hallmark Channel, going for a hike, engaging with puppies, kittens, kitten yoga, goat yoga, lemur yoga. You can go do yoga with the lemurs, painting with cats, watercolors. You might like to journal. You might like coloring books. I thought adult coloring books was going to be like the best thing in the world until I got my first adult coloring book and went, I need some super fine color pencils. Like this is not, I'm thinking 64 box of crayons and the child's version of coloring books, which I still to this day love. But that's not what I got. And so it was a whole other learning process. And it started to stress me out because I really felt like I had to get really detailed and I had to do all the shading. So again, make sure that for you, you define what self-care is for you. It isn't going to look like Erica's or Tim's or Mariah's or Amanda's or anybody else that's on this call. It's your self-care. It's not other people's self-care. If you're not really sure what that looks like, and I will tell you that up until 4 years ago, I thought I knew. And so I spent over a year kind of trying on other people's version of self-care. And some things fit, some things didn't fit. Some things fit, but were pretty location dependent. I discovered I really, really like kayaking. But I discovered I really, really like kayaking on tiny little rivers in Florida, not so much on the bigger rivers or other locations around the country. So apparently I found one. I'm just kind of, location dependent. And so, maybe you're a foodie, maybe it's a cup of coffee. Like I love going out for coffee, but I realize I really like going out with coffee with friends. So figure out what works for you. As we start to continue to build your confidence and you are thinking about how do you own your power, you're like, okay, fine, I need to figure out how to have some self-care, got it, balance, yada, yada, yada. Okay, but one of the things that comes with that, and the only way you're going to get any stronger is if you actually figure out how to put in those boundaries. And if we're not really sure that boundaries are an example of strength, regardless of your knowledge of history or your political affiliation, if you think about the places that put up walls for boundaries or something for a boundary, they do it because they're trying to demonstrate that they are in leadership. Sometimes saying no to things is way better than saying yes. And my favorite statement in the world, and I have used this with my children since they were young. I've used them with my staff, pretty much every place I've ever worked, which is when somebody comes to me and says, hey, Kate, I need whatever it is. All right. I need tomorrow off. I need construction paper. If it's my kids, hey, mom, I need poster board. Hey, mom, I need the keys. Hey, mom, I need to go here. A significant other that wants me to go to the grocery store for them. My response is always, do you need an answer right now? They ask me a question. They want me to give them an answer. I ask them if they need an answer right now. And if they say yes, the answer is always no. Okay? I want you to think that about. If somebody comes to me, especially if I'm doing something, I mean, right now I work from home and I've worked at home off and on a lot over the last 30 years, just because I found that it worked better for my own head. I was more likely to get the work done. So even as a director, I always had days where I worked at home before remote work was a thing. And if my kids came in and said, hey, mom, I need, I'm like, do you need an answer right now? Because, usually I'm working. And if they're like, oh, no, 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 I don't need an answer right now, because they knew that if they needed an answer right now, the answer is no. Okay. And if they go, oh, no, whenever you get to it, and then you go, great, I've got time at 3 o'clock, or I'll get back to you tomorrow. That's it. That is setting the boundary. Okay. That is you having control over the time and the narrative. Now, it doesn't mean that the answer is automatically going to be yes when you get a chance to go talk to them tomorrow. It may mean that between now and tomorrow, you've had an opportunity to check a budget. If it's about your children, maybe you've had a chance to have a conversation with their other parent or with whoever else might be part of whatever project they have planned. Or it may be one of those things that you realize that this is a midnight project that is due tomorrow, and you're going to let natural consequences happen. Right. And so maybe you're like, well, how else can you make this project happen? Yes, you might want white poster board, but we've got cardboard in the garage. So maybe you're going to do yours on brown cardboard because that's what we're going to do. Or, maybe you can call a friend and see if a friend will take you. Or maybe you can find another piece of cardboard or poster board and you could use the backside, right? You can recycle and upcycle. So remembering that boundary is a perfect example of leadership strength. And you do not have to say yes to everybody. By saying no, you're actually getting your voice back. By saying no, or do you need an answer right now, is a great opportunity for you to demonstrate that you're going to get back to them. And you're respecting yourself by saying, okay, I need to think this through. What is the impact of me doing this? Okay. My favorite are the staff who, like, every 20 minutes need to go to the bathroom. Like, I'm in a classroom every 20 minutes because they want me to do the bathroom break. And if I've already got schedules for bathroom breaks or there's a floater, it should never have to be me. If somebody's got a situation where it needs to be that frequent, then I'm going to say, hey, maybe you need to take the afternoon off and go to the doctor's because maybe there's something serious here. And if I am sharing that with them, I'm showing them that I'm paying attention, that I'm concerned. And if they go, no, 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 and then you go back and you're a program that's got video and you realize that, they've snuck in the phone in the pocket. And so the real reason for all of the 20-minute bathroom breaks and the frequency of bathroom breaks has really got to do with maybe their social media addiction, or maybe text messages they're getting from friends or family or a loved one. And so sometimes I guess that some of those are maybe all be the same people, but it's okay for you to set those boundaries. It's even more important if you're the director, if some of those boundaries are already in place, right? They're already in your parent handbook, your staff handbook, they're in your standard operating procedures. It is absolutely your responsibility to follow those. And so you're not being some sort of wicked witch of the West or whatever they may want to say because you're not letting them go to the bathroom every hour for 20 minutes. Um, Either they've got a healthcare issue or they have a phone issue, right? Like, so what's the reason? And help them get whatever they need because the kids need them. This is all about the kids, right? Okay. Now, some of us are really, really good about going, hey, I get off at 5 or I get off at 6 or I only work 40 hours. One of the directors we worked with, there was Carly and Maria. And Maria had parents who would always send late night texts, and Maria would respond. And so this became something that the parents thought was okay. And about 90% of the time, they weren't things that Maria needed to respond to. They were more FYI text messages. And even if she did need to respond, it did not need to happen before 8 a.m. So as part of owning your power, finding your voice, building your confidence, your follow-up, your follow-through, all of that needs to come with that boundary of time. And no offense, 11:53 or 10:53, 9:53, 21:53. I'm just going to go with that one, right? 21:53 is not a time that you need to be responding to everybody's text messages. And it is okay if you don't. Now, if you're somebody who has been, maybe this has just been some of those things like you're one of those people who hate the red dot on their phone. And I know those folks, and it is okay to be one of those folks. But there's this little trick. You can respond and you can schedule the response. Did you know that? How many of you knew that? If you knew you could schedule on your phone a text response, put a hand up or give me a thumbs up or a heart or something. Okay. Yes, no, maybe. Okay. There's a few people. If you didn't know, you've just learned something. Amanda, you got is that just a question? Is that a hand because you did know, or is that a hand because you got a question? You knew. Awesome. Now, some of us may know and we forget and send it regular anyway, right? But I love the fact that I can clear all of my little notifications, but nobody has to know I'm on the phone. So, well, good. I'm glad that you learned something new. So, if nothing else out of today, the one thing you learned. And so, if you're not sure how to do it, if you've got an Apple or a Mac, go find a 20 something in your building. They may know. And if you really don't know, at the end of this session will be my contact information. And you are absolutely perfectly okay sending me a message and go, okay, I have an iPhone or I have an Android or whatever. How do I do that? So you can also do the same thing with emails. Gmail, Outlook, all of them have that ability. So again, if those are things, I'm one of those people who have thoughts in my head. And so I used to just have a notepad and I'd make my notes in the middle of the night, and then in the morning I can't read them, right. And I've tried voice dictation. I've tried a little bit of everything. And if it is something that really is on my heart, or it's just really it's stewing, I have found that what works really best for me is to get up, address it. Right. So I come into my office, I send the message or I type the message. I either send it and let it sit in draft, right? Because sometimes that just is, that's nicer, right? Because that way I can look at it in the morning when maybe I'm not a little emotional, depending on what the email's about, right? But once I get that stuff out of my head, I can go back to sleep and I'm all good. But if I try to just roll over and ignore it, it ends up being a toss and turn night. So again, that's a version of self-care for me, is understanding what works for me, what doesn't work for me. Maybe it's even, knowing your triggers, right? So now, not everybody does this, right? I do know that there are directors who are, I am at my parents' beck and call and my staff's beck and call 24/7. And you know what? I respect that. And if that works for you and that's the culture you've created and it doesn't get abused, in other words, they still kind of know what do they send you, what do they not send you, do it, because those parents know that you're going to respond or they know that you're listening. um everybody has their own way of making that work, and it isn't going to work for everybody, right? So just like curriculum styles don't work for every program, you as a director, as an administrator, as an owner, you also are going to have things that work for you that aren't going to work for the other 28 people on this call, right? So you need to figure out what works for you. Erica was in the chat and said, you got to know what your triggers are. Absolutely. Like, I know my trigger. My trigger is attendance and being on time. And so I tell people during orientation, I've learned now, like, so since 2020, I actually have to tell people even in an interview, because it didn't get any better over the last 5 years. And so I'm pretty open with people that one of my big triggers is attendance. And, if you're scheduled to be at work at 9 a.m., that does not mean that 9:01 you're pulling in the driveway and you still have to do all the stuff before you're ready in your classroom. And so, again, you need to know what works for you. Now, in Carly's situation, so in another director situation, and again, some of you have probably had this experience where there's an owner and there's a director. Now, if you're a director and you are an early bird and you're there for opening shift at 6 a.m. and you do your best, like 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. That's your zone, right? Like that's when you get stuff done. If that's you, know it and then share it with people. Because in Carly's situation, her owner was a night owl, right? And so her owner would kind of come and close one of the locations. They had multiple locations. The owner would close one of the locations, and then she'd have all these ideas. And so, like from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m., she'd be sending Carly messages. And Carly would feel obligated to answer. And Carly was literally writing her 2 week notice when she reached out to us and asked us for feedback. And Carrie, so co-host, business partner, cousin, Carrie said, "So I have a question. Have you guys actually had conversations about when you work best?" And Carly didn't really understand. So it took a conversation with Carrie, and then it took it's a trigger, or do you say it? Oh, so I'm going to come back to that, Michaela. Yeah, I do not tell people it's a trigger. Great question, though. I do not generally tell people this is a trigger. I just kind of stress what are really important to me. And so sometimes during a conversation, especially in an interview, I'll say, "Hey, what did you really like about the last place you worked? What worked better for you? What works well for you?" And if I get somebody who's like, "Oh, I really like flexible schedules," then I might share with them how kids really, the kids are counting on them. And so if the kids think that you're going to be there every morning, 5 days a week, and they think that you're going to be there for circle time, whatever circle time is, that it's really important for the kids for you to be there on time. Right. So I don't make it about me. I just know it's about me. Okay, so back to Carly and her situation with her boss, with her owner. And so basically we got them to have a conversation, and we realized that time, the early bird and the night owl. And so basically, um, what happened is that Carly basically said, "Look, unless it's something that you absolutely have to have an answer right now, send it to me as an email and I'll get to it in the morning. And the only things to text me about are going to be things that you really need. That's kind of an emergency check, right?" Okay. So again, that's one of those things that are really important for you to be able to have that two-way conversation with the people that you work with. So as we start to wrap down our time, we got about 10 minutes left in today's session. I'd love it if, now, not everybody comes to a to a webinar and brings paper and pencil, and I get that. But if you do have some paper and pencil, what I'd love for you to do is think real quick, what is one boundary you're going to implement this week? And it can be something that's personal. I'm not asking you to share it on chat. I'm asking you to write it down for yourself, because I want you to be able to leave here with an actual personal action plan, because that's really important. We all go to training. I love the fact that the entire country, especially in early childcare, we have embraced technology. We are using webinars at association levels, at vendor levels. We are all about sharing information, and we're all about getting quality training and getting those continuing education hours in different ways. But let's also make sure that they're useful to you. So um, give yourself, maybe a little bit of homework. Okay. Leadership extends beyond your center. Okay. This is an opportunity for you to have a voice, be an advocate, be a trainer, share the information, whether you share it locally or you share it regionally or nationally, because you already have the power. What I want you to do is use it. Okay. And, you know, remember that sometimes what your biggest insight is may not be the biggest insight of the other folks on this call. And that's okay. When you go to a training, you're going to get things out of them. You might even been to the same training. There's a couple of folks on here who I know have heard this exact workshop, but they may have been in a different place. And so now they get something totally different. Or I don't know, as a presenter, I'm sure I tell stories differently from one time I tell the story to the next time I tell the story, or somebody might ask a question and catch me on the, do you actually tell them it's a trigger? Which is a great question because I never really had anybody actually ask me if I tell people those are my triggers. I just kind of own them and I know they're my triggers, right? So just as my 30-second plug for childcare conversations, you can email us, and I know it's a long email address, but it's pretty easy. It's Kate and Carrie at childcareconversations.com. You can be a guest on our podcast. Like I said, we air podcasts now twice a week. And we'd love to have guests or other folks in the field as guests. And then you can get that application at childcareconversations.com. You can find us literally on every platform: Pinterest, YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, all at Childcare Conversations. So you don't have to try to remember any really complicated stuff. If you're listening and you're planning conferences or you want speakers, you can find us at kateandcarrie.com. So not a whole lot of stuff going on. But what I do want you to do is if you will let me know your thoughts of today. So I know most of you are sitting there with your phone. So pull out your phone, scan this QR code, or go ahead and go to talk.ac/Kate and Carrie and enter the word sword for this workshop and share kind of your thoughts on the workshop. Did it help you? Did you get something out of it? What would you like to have seen differently? It's okay. I sometimes I'll joke and say, if you didn't like it, don't feel the need to write any feedback, but really, it would be helpful. It'd be helpful for NCCA to know whether or not it was helpful to you. Was it worth the time for your day? Those kinds of things. And so as you are literally in your countdown, because we are literally less than 5 minutes down, I want you to remember that the next 48 hours is key and crucial because it literally is about taking action and starting today. And this is not about taking perfect action. Remember, we talked like a whole hour ago about that confidence comes from taking action. And for some of us, that's just getting started. It's the reason we wrote down what is going to be our action plan. What's the one thing we might try to set a boundary with this week. And again, it can be a personal or something at home. It can be a work-related project. It doesn't have to necessarily be all about work. I find personally the workshops I go to be a better boss or to be a better manager, if I can figure out how to spin that into my day job, which is as a mom, or in my day life, my everyday life, I get so much better at implementing it because I have like 4 people to practice. And, most of my life I had 5 people to practice, right? I had a significant other and children. And, now my children are all adults and no significant other. So I still got 4 people. Anyway, if you had a sword in your hand right now, what would you do differently if you totally owned your power? So when I do this workshop in person, we travel with that sword. That sword has its own suitcase, which does cause a little bit of an issue as we go through to TSA, but we do bring that sword and we encourage you to think about owning your power. And if you have a friend who is into historical reenactment, or you have a historical weapons group around you that might have a sword nearby, go borrow the sword, go hold the sword and take an opportunity to own your power. There's a whole different feeling if you can sit there and hold a sword with some serious power, because if you've not done it before, and to me, it's one of those things that you should be able to do just about anywhere. But if you can't, the last tip of the day. So Amy Cuddy is a Harvard researcher. She's got great YouTube, TED Talks, go find them. And she talks about the power pose. And one of the things that we do when we've got, in-person workshops is we try to get everybody to stand up. And so if you're at home, I'm not going to do it because I have a lot of junk on the floor, but go ahead and stand up. Put your feet shoulder width apart and put your hands on your hip, and then find your mantra. One of the things I love to encourage folks to do is to do this in the morning in front of their mirror and say, I got this. I do this in my office if I'm about to have a difficult conversation with a parent or with a staff person, and I channel my Wonder Woman, my Supergirl, my Batwoman. Um, you know, there might be some days where I go and channel my Spider-Man, so whatever I need, I bring that power pose to it and I remind myself that I've got this. If you ever listen to Mel Robbins, whether you listen to her podcast or you read her books, she also talks about one of the things that successful leaders do. One of the top 7 things they do every morning is basically some sort of, positive affirmation. And so this is an opportunity for you to have your own positive affirmation. And so strike that power pose, tell yourself that you've got this, whatever you might need to tell yourself, because it has been wonderful to get to see and have a conversation with you all on this Wednesday afternoon. And I know that all over the country, you guys have different temps and different weather. And so from the hot, muggy, rainy part of Texas, I am glad I have gotten to share this afternoon with you. And if I have not met you before, hello. If I have met you and I'm going to see you in a few days, see you soon. You can always reach us. Again, that is Kate and Carrie at childcareconversations.com.